everyone! So today we're going to be learning how to put together a clarinet. And I've got my clarinet in its case here. So the first thing you want to do is just find out where's the top of that case because you don't want that instrument falling out. Oftentimes, depending on what your case looks like, you might have an arrow here pointing upwards to the top part. Or you might want to look for the brand of your clarinet. So in this case, mine is Jupiter. And you can see it clearly here. So I am just going to put this back down. And when you're opening the case, if you think you've got the top, just open slowly because you don't want things falling out again. So we're going to open slowly and make sure that, yes, we've opened it correctly and our parts are at the bottom here. So I find it easy to just take out everything and we'll just go step by step to put together each of these parts. So let me just take out everything here. And if you got a little cloth here, just leave it inside the case. We'll be using that when we disassemble the clarinet. So I've got all my parts and I'll just put the case away. Okay, so you should have about 5 main parts here, plus a cork grease and your reed. So how I like to do it is we usually put together a clarinet starting from bottom up. So this is our most bottommost part. This is called the bell, and we're going to start with that. So here's my bell, and then you've got these 2 longish rods here. Here we've got one that has 1 cork on one side. That's going to be your lower joint. And then you've got another one here that's got 2 corks on either side. So here's our 2 corks. And this one's called the upper joint. So we're going to start with the lower joint. You can see again that we have cork here, and oftentimes if you have a newer clarinet, you might find it hard to put together the 2 parts together. So you might want to apply some cork grease. So here I've got my Carton Premium cork grease, and it's almost like a chapstick. So here you go, this chapstick-like thing. Just gonna twist it upwards so that the the cork grease comes up, and you're just going to apply a thin layer. Don't make it too thick. You can see me just applying a thin layer going all around the cork part. Just carefully applying. And once you've put on the cork grease, you can see some of the cork grease on the cork. Just put back your cork grease and set it aside. And you can do it for all the parts that have cork on it, but we'll just start with the lower joint. Okay, so when you're putting it together, you'll notice that there are rods on these joints, and you really want to be careful where you're not going to be holding on to those rods because they're very sensitive, and if you apply too much pressure or if you hold it too tightly, it can actually damage that part of the clarinet or even break it. So instead, you want to put it against the palm of your hand and wrap your fingers around and aim for these rings, the key rings, and also the holes. In this case, there aren't any holes, but basically you just want to wrap it around those parts and not the rods. Otherwise, you're going to break the rods. And then you're going to put your bell and you're going to put your lower joint together, and we're going to twist it. Now, when you're twisting it, really, really important, don't twist it in a 360-degree manner. Just twist it back and forth so that the pieces fit together just like that. Okay, and just to orient yourself, this part here is the back of the clarinet, and the keys in the front is the front of our clarinet, just for reference points. Okay, so we've got our first 2 parts together. Great. Let's move on to the next part. Now, there's one thing I really want to point out to you, and that is called the bridge. So if you look on our next part, which is the upper joint, you'll see here that there's a part right here, and that's the bridge. And if you see me pressing this button right here with my second finger on my left hand, you can see it's moving up and down. And on the lower joint, we also have this bridge, except it's looking a little bit different. And when you're putting your upper joint and your lower joint together, you want those 2 parts of the bridge to fit together. Now, you have to be careful because if you just shove it in, you can actually have those two bridge parts clash together and potentially damage it. So that's why I pointed out earlier, you need to depress that ring so that the bridge on the upper joint lifts upward. And now, using the technique we talked about, avoiding the rods, we can put together those two parts so that the bridge in the upper joint and the bridge in the lower joint comes together. Just like that. You can see my bridge here has formed nicely. And again, it makes sense because now the back of the upper joint and the lower joint matches, and the front, where all our rings and our keys and our holes are, matches up as well. Great. Now, for the next part, we've got this lovely piece, and that's called a barrel because it looks like a barrel, and we've got two holes on either side. So you want to take the side that is the fatter part of the barrel. You can see how it kind of elongates there, and that's going to be the part you're going to put onto our upper joint. So again, we're going to do our nice twisting back and forth motion, making sure that when you're holding onto the clarinets, you're not holding onto the rods. So twist, twist. And what's really important here is that you can see that I left a bit of space between the barrel and the upper joint, and that's because you want to do that for tuning purposes of the clarinet. Okay, now for the last part. This is our mouthpiece. I recommend that you put on the mouthpiece onto the clarinet first before you put on the reed because it'll make it a lot easier and it'll create more stability in it overall for your instrument. So before I do the mouthpiece, let's just open up our reed. So I already have my reed out here, and you want to just soak it in a small container of water while you're putting up the rest of the clarinet, just so that when you do play the clarinet, it's going to be nice and wet and moisturized. Okay, so take off the cap of your mouthpiece, take out the ligature, and now you've got your mouthpiece. So this flat part here, that's going to align with the back of the clarinet. You see this nice flat part of our mouthpiece. So again, if you want to put in some cork grease, I find that for some reason the mouthpiece seems to be a little bit harder to slip on. So we're going to apply our technique of putting on cork grease, just a thin layer around the cork part. Okay, now we're going to slip this onto our lovely clarinet here. And twist again, making sure that your left hand is holding on to those empty holes. Great, now you can see that the original flat part I was talking about lines up with the back of the clarinet, and the front part lines up with the front of the clarinet. And you might want to just twist your barrel back out a little bit so that we have that nice space we created earlier for tuning purposes. Okay, here's the last part, putting on the reed. So take that reed you've been soaking in your water container, and if you want to just come a little bit closer, we're going to show you how to put together our reed. So I'm going to take my reed and we're going to match it against that flat part of my mouthpiece. So you can see kind of the outline of the reed where it's going to go, and you want to line it up so that it lines kind of parallel to that. And when you do that, make sure you keep kind of this nice spacing between the tip of the reed and the tip of the mouthpiece, about the size of the sliver of hair. So you can see that sliver of hair, see that little bit black part. Okay, and then now we're going to grab our ligature, which is our little metal piece here. When you put in a ligature, make sure that you've loosened the screws enough so that it can fit on nicely and snugly. So, and make sure that your screws are facing to the right of you when you put it on. So you can see how my ligature just fit on nicely and my screws are to the right of myself. And making sure that it's aligned nicely, you can now tighten it. Don't tighten it all the way, it's going to affect the sound. Okay, there we go. And well, you look at this, we've got one completed clarinet. So that is how you put together a clarinet, guys. Thanks for watching and have a great day.